Hey guys, welcome back. So today we want to talk about something that popped up in the comment section of one of our recent videos. As I often say, please comment down below because many times we'll read those comments and we will use them for content ideas in future videos. And this video is the case, makes that case. So anyway, we had recently posted a video talking about the 460 Roland. We talked about 10mm and talked about how much more powerful they were than other cartridges that were out there. And some of you guys said in the comments, well, what about 357 Sig? And also, what about 7.5 FK? And those were good questions. How does 10mm and 460 Roland stack up to the 7.5 FK and the 357 Sig that's been on the market for a number of years? And that's what we're going to explore in today's video. If you'd like to support us here at the Military Arms Channel, the best way to do that is become part of our Patreon family. There is a link in the video description below. With that being said, let's get started with today's video, taking a look at the power numbers that we generated in a previous video with the 460 Roland, 10mm, 357 Sig, and 7.5 FK. Do you carry a handgun for self-defense? If so, you should probably get some instruction. Now, nothing can take the place of actual hands-on physical training, but there are resources out on the internet that can certainly help you progress in your learning of how to use a handgun for self-defense. And one of those resources is PDN, or the Personal Defense Network. The Personal Defense Network has thousands of members. They also have many different instructors that make videos in their particular discipline, and they are posted for members to view. Membership is as little as $2 a year if you use the link in the video description below, and that's for our Military Arms Channel viewers. So you can get 1 year of membership for $2, which is 98% off, and check out what PDN has to offer in terms of combatives, how to use a handgun, and many, many other topics. So check out PDN, or the Personal Defense Network. Again, the link is in the video description below. 10mm was a cartridge that gained notoriety after the 1986 Dade County shootout, where the FBI was involved in a gunfight in Dade County, Florida. And the 10mm was a relatively new cartridge at the time. It was considered extremely powerful, and it still is today. And the FBI had a knee-jerk reaction. They dumped their 9mm and went to 10mm. There's a whole story behind that. I'm not going to rehash that in today's video. But later in 1994, Sig, the company Sig, decided they were going to take a 10mm case. Now keep in mind, in 1994, the 10mm was already falling out of favor. But they decided to take a 10mm case and neck it down to 357 and call it 357 Sig. Basically, they were trying to make an auto-loading 357 Magnum cartridge for sale primarily to the law enforcement market. Keep in mind, throughout the 80s and the early 90s, law enforcement were trading in their revolvers for automatic service pistols, and they were hoping to capitalize on that, the attraction to the 357 Magnum, translate that over to the 357 Sig, and that's where they hope to carve out a market. Well, today in 2022, 357 Sig has kind of gone the way of the 10mm. Yes, it still has a cult-like following out there, but very rarely do you see people running the 357 Sig. The ammunition sometimes can be hard to find, and it's generally more expensive than things like 9mm or even 10mm range ammunition sometimes. So where does the 357 Sig stack up against the 10mm? And just for giggles, we thought we would bring out the 7.5 FK. This is a bottleneck cartridge that doesn't have a parent case. This cartridge was developed in the Czech Republic, and it's another bottleneck cartridge that's another little hot rod. And we'll talk about how it performs in terms of ballistics gel. We are using the 95 grain machined copper bullet. That's all we have left of the 7.5 FK ammo, and we will toss that data in with this video as well. So let's take a look at those numbers. What do we get velocity-wise with different bullet weights, and then what do we get in terms of penetration using ballistics gel from Clear Ballistics, and talk about some of those performances because it's really kind of interesting. Really quick, let's take a look at the three pistols we used for today's testing. First is the Sig X10. This is a 10mm. On top of it is a Romeo 2 red dot sight. This pistol holds 15 rounds. And the grip size is pretty much the same as their 9mm pistols, and it's a brand new gun on the market. For the 357 Sig, we are using a Glock. This Glock is outfitted with XS sights. Now these sights are really nice. I put these on just for this video for this gun. This rear sight is really tall, so it would really work nicely with the MOS system if you have a red dot sight mounted on it. But it is a nice, tall, metal, thick sight that fits into the dovetail back here, and then, of course, screws in up front on the Glock. But if you pick up excess sights, you can get them, obviously, the dovetail front and rear for those guns that require that. But these sit up nice and tall. They have tritium in the rear, tritium in the front, and then a big, bright dot around that front sight. Gives a really, really positive sight picture. So the Glock was our test gun. All these are service-sized handguns, full-size handguns for our testing today. And then last but not least is the Psd Pistol, and this is the 7-point FK chambered gun. You can also shoot 9mm or 10mm out of these guns, depending on which conversion kit you have to put in it. This gun is a polymer framed pistol. Unlike the other two, this one actually has a hammer and an external manual safety, and is also cut for a red dot sight, but I'm just using the iron sights today. And again, this one's chambered in 7.5 FK. So now let's take a look at those numbers. We did more shooting with the 357 SIG because we wanted to use a variety of ammunition to try to get an idea of just how powerful the cartridge can be. Now, this is representative of the ammunition we're able to get today. As of 2022, ammunition's still in relatively short supply, so beggars can't be choosers. You got to kind of go with what you can find. And these are the hot rod rounds that we were able to find. So first up was the 68 grain 357 SIG, and this is from Underwood. They're known for making some really nice boutique ammunition. And I have a little cheat sheet over here. And so the 68 grain, we clocked over our lab radar at doing 2142 feet per second, and that gave us 693 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. Believe it or not, this little 68 grain bullet was the most powerful cartridge that we fired out here today out of the 357 SIG. Next up is the 115 grain 357 SIG, and the 115 grain bullet gave us a velocity of 1,528 feet per second, but only gave us 596 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. This would be the least powerful 357 SIG ammunition that we fired this afternoon. Then we had some 125 grain Underwood as well. This stuff clocked at 1489, which gave us 615 foot-pounds of energy. So the most powerful was that little 68 grain hot rod screaming bullet coming out of the Glock. Now, the Gold Dot, which is also a 125 grain bullet, this is a very easy to find commercial cartridge out there. You'll find law enforcement, stuff like that, using it. And the Gold Dot clocked at 1393 and gave us 539 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. Then we took a look at 10mm. We're using some of the Buffalo Bore heavy 10mm. It's a 180 grain bullet. We clocked this thing going 180 grain bullet at 1354, which gave us 733 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. And last but not least, the FK. We fired the FK and out of the Psd Pistol, and that gave us a 1,928 feet per second, almost 2,000 feet per second, and gave us a muzzle energy of 784 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. So, taking a look at these numbers on the board, the FK beats the 10mm by, let's see, we had 733 versus 784. So, it's notable. The 7.5 FK is more powerful than the 10mm we have out here, but if we compare that to the 460 Roland, I still have that data on the board. The 460 Roland gave a 185 grain bullet doing 1426 feet per second, gave us 835 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, which trumps everything out here today. So the 460 Roland is still more powerful than the 7.5 FK. And if you want to see that video, I'll put a link down below so you guys can go watch the 460 Roland. We're not going to go over that. We have a whole video dedicated to it. So when you take a look at the numbers, just the numbers alone, the 357 SIG does not compete with the 10mm in terms of power. Now, that's not to say somebody hasn't developed a load for the 357 SIG that can rival the 10mm, but I've yet to see it. And so the 10mm still trumps that 357 SIG. So then it boils down to weight of the handgun, carrying 125 grain bullets versus 180 grain bullets. So the 357 SIG is going to be a little bit lighter to carry every single day on like a duty belt, or even tucked inside your pants, inside the waistband carry, whatever. It's going to be a little bit more comfortable pistol to carry than something like this X10, which is already heavy before you load the 15 rounds of 180 grain rounds into it. Aside from that, recoil. The 357 Sig has a very sharp crack to it. It does have noticeable recoil, but the 10 millimeter does have more recoil, at least perceived recoil, than the 357 Sig as well. So there are your trade-offs, right? The 10 millimeter is going to give you the horsepower. The 357 Sig is going to give you a slightly less recoil impulse. You're going to have a muzzle flash. You're going to have that crack, but the gun report isn't really all that important. You're going to get your ears rung regardless if you don't have hearing protection on. And then when you talk about the 7.5 FK, this gun really isn't practical for everyday carry. It's a very heavy gun, and it's rather large compared to the other guns out here. It may not look like it, but it is. But this would be a great gun for dangerous game, and that gets into the penetration results that we achieved with the different ammunition that we shot out here this afternoon. So next, let's talk about the penetration in that clear ballistics gelatin of each of the cartridges that we've discussed out here today. So let's take a look at those penetration numbers. Now, keep in mind, guys, we are using clear ballistics gelatin in today's testing. Clear ballistics gelatin is silicon-based, and if you take a look at the FBI gelatin that they use, it's organic-based. It's very temperature-sensitive. You have to keep it right at a specific temperature to get the same consistent results, where clear ballistics is pretty much temperature blind. So it will give you consistent results. It doesn't matter if it's 70 degrees, 60 degrees, or 80 degrees, you're still going to get consistent performance out of it. Therefore, in my opinion, it makes a better test medium than the FBI gel. Keep in mind, neither the clear ballistics nor the FBI gel simulate actual living tissue. That's why the FBI says they want 12 to 18 inches of penetration, because everybody in the comments always goes, oh, you're going to over penetrate if you do 18 inches of penetration in gel. No, you won't, because if you do 18 inches of penetration in gel in actual living organic tissue, which varies in density, you're probably only going to get about half of that in terms of penetration, maybe a little bit more, but certainly not 18 inches. What the gelatin does is give you a consistent test medium so you can compare various cartridges against each other and have that constant variable being that gelatin. It never changes. And that's the benefit of using gelatin in ballistic tests. With that being said, let's talk about the 357 Sig first, because this is the cartridge we're all out here to talk about today. So the 357 Sig, we did do velocity testing with the Underwood 68 grain stuff. I'm sorry, let me restate that. The Underwood 115 grain stuff, but it wound up being the lowest powered of the three Underwood cartridges. The 68 grain and the 125 grain posted better ballistic numbers, so we went with that. We only have 2 blocks of gel out here today, so we had to pick our battles, and so we went with the 68 grain Underwood bullet, the machined copper, and the 125 grain Underwood and the 125 grain gold dots from Spear. So how did they do? Well, let's take a look at the 68 grain bullet. This is it right here. It's that little screwdriver tip that Lehigh Defense came up with. A lot of other people have since copied, and Underwood loads it into the Extreme Defender. It's an outstanding bullet. We've done lots of testing with it. It's an amazing performing bullet. And once again, it does exactly what it's supposed to do. This little guy gave us 18 inches of penetration, which is good, really good. Anyway, so let's talk about the 125 grain bullets. Now, both of these gave us the same penetration results, both the Underwood and the Spear gold dots. So both of those gave us 12.5 inches of penetration into the gelatin. That's just barely making that FBI threshold, but it does technically make it, so it would make for a fairly good defensive cartridge. Now, the hollow points, unlike the machined bullet, the copper 68 grainer, those lead bullets with the jacketed hollow points gave really good expansion. So they're going to enlarge in size, but that's also what limits their depth of penetration. So all three of those would be solid choices for self-defense. Next, let's take a look at the 10 millimeter. Because a lot of people were talking about the 357 Sig versus the 10 millimeter when I was talking about overall ballistic performance. We have, in this case, a Buffalo Bore 180 grain bullet. It's a jacketed hollow point. And despite being a jacketed hollow point, that 10 millimeter bullet gave us 19.75 inches of penetration. So it actually exceeded the FBI's standards. Now, if I were to put that bullet into organic gelatin, it would probably penetrate a little bit deeper. So you're talking about really good penetration. 10 millimeter, I would highly recommend carrying good hollow point in it so you don't get too much penetration. But if you're going to use it for dangerous game, using a solid tipped bullet, much like you can get from Underwood and the Lehigh bullets, those solid tips would be great for dangerous game, because with dangerous game, you don't care about expansion. You got to get that penetration on things like bear and stuff like that, because penetration is all that's going to save you. With a handgun bullet, you're going to have to pierce something that animal needs to live to defend yourself. So always use solids when you're using a handgun for defense against four-legged critters that are dangerous game. So 10 millimeter, still pretty darn powerful, outstanding penetration, and definitely just reaffirms my opinion of the 10 millimeter cartridge being outstanding. So where does the 7.5 FK fit into all of this? Well, the 7.5 FK, now they do have copper jacketed lead core bullets that are available for it. I don't have any left, but we do have these 95 grain machined copper bullets that have a hollow point, if you will, but it pretty quickly sheds. That hollow point will break off into little petals, and you'll have a core of the bullet that penetrates to the maximum depth, and that maximum depth was 24 inches of silicon gel. So an organic gel, it would do even more than that. That's what I call over penetrating, but that's for self-defense. Going back to my discussion about dangerous game, the 7.5 FK is going to do really well in terms of penetration against larger game animals. You can use it for hunting larger game animals, and you can also use it for self-defense against dangerous animals that might be out there in the woods that would come and get you, like bear. So the FK definitely does very, very well. But then again, the FK isn't something you're likely to carry as an everyday handgun. That's going to go to guns like the X10 or the 357 Sig Glock, or, you know, they make all sorts of various handguns, chamber 357 Sig. So where does the 357 Sig, in my opinion, fall in defensive cartridges? Well, it's certainly not a bad choice. I think the 357 Sig is plenty powerful enough, has a great recoil impulse for a cartridge that generates as much energy as it does, and you can get plenty of rounds into a magazine, keeping in mind, again, that its parent case is 10 millimeters, so an average size, full-size duty pistol like the Glock, you're looking at about 15 rounds capacity, which is more than enough, and you can always carry spare magazines. So what does it have over the 10 millimeter? Well, first of all, it has less perceived recoil, in my opinion, so it means it's going to be a little bit easier to shoot more quickly and for some novice shooters, but keep in mind it also has more perceived recoil than 9 millimeter, and 9 millimeter is an outstanding defensive cartridge, but it certainly generates more power than 9 millimeter. It does not come anywhere near the 460 Roland in terms of power, but then the 460 Roland isn't something I would consider carrying every day either, any more than I would the Psd Pistol. The Psd Pistol, great for dangerous game, great as a sidekick on a hunting trip for that dangerous game or dangerous animals that you want to defend yourself against. If you're running around with a bolt-action rifle, having this on your hips, going to give you that little bit of extra security, but certainly not an everyday carry pistol, just given its size and weight. So, would I recommend 357 Sig? Absolutely. Plenty of power, plenty of penetration, plenty of ammunition choices. We have Fiocchi, we have Federal, we have Sig Sauer, we have Underwood, we have Spear. Everybody out there makes 357 Sig ammunition, so you do have a choice. The only downside, again, is being that cost. For me, I'm going to stick with 10 millimeter. I like it, and everybody has their preferences. I look forward to your comments, guys. What do you think about the 357 Sig? We got the idea for this video from those comments that you've made on past videos, so comment down below. We really do read the comments, and we do get video ideas. If you guys would like to support us here at the Military Arms channel, the best way to do that is to become part of our Patreon family. There's a link in the video description below. Click that link, check out some of the perks, and consider supporting us over on Patreon. Right here, underneath the video player you're watching right now, there's a little join button. Mash that join button, and you can support us right here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. And last but not least, please check out Copper Custom. Thank you for 14 years of support, and we'll talk to you guys soon.